Hello, members and friends of Irving Park Lutheran Church. My name is Joanne Oddie, and it is my pleasure to be preaching today while Pastor Aaron has a much-needed vacation. I'm a member here at Irving Park Lutheran, and I'm also a deacon with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And deacons' calls are to word and service and to bridge a gap between church and community. Currently, I am without call and, like many folks, was laid off from my position during this coronavirus pandemic. But I am praying and looking for new opportunities, and I'm glad to be preaching today. So with that simple introduction, let's jump into things. When reading the gospel for today, I recognize this story that is remembered, known, and told for its miraculous nature. Both Jesus and Peter walk on water. Whoa, how cool is that? Somehow, as a kid, the main message that I took from this passage was pretty focused on Peter and his ability and then inability to continue walking on water. If Peter would have been more faithful, if he would have believed harder, if he wouldn't have gotten distracted by those waves and would have focused in on Jesus, he would have been able to keep walking. At least that seemed like that's what the message was. I mean, Jesus even seemingly reprimands him, "You of little faith." And then somehow I easily translated that into wondering if I too could walk on water if I had enough faith. Maybe miracles that happened in the Bible were accessible today, but we were just doing it wrong. How much faith is needed to pull off the feat of walking on water? And then you think, if Peter faltered and was reprimanded, would I ever be able to pass this test of faith? It seemed really doubtful. And as much as Peter faltered, he must have also been really special, because I have never seen anyone walk on water. But as I read this passage now, today, as an adult, honestly, I still have questions about how miracles work. Those haven't exactly gone away. But I also think it's easy to focus our attention there on the miracle of walking on water, when really the message of the story is much more profound and life-changing than that. So I ask myself, what was the point of Jesus and Peter walking on water? Why does it happen? And then that's when I see that it wasn't really about Peter at all. Early in the morning, he came walking toward them on the sea. This miracle of Jesus walking on the water was a demonstration of who he was, of who Jesus was. The miracle was a vehicle to show his presence, his identity. Now, the disciples didn't truly see him at first, and they thought he was a ghost, and they were afraid. Jesus assures them that it is him, and then even then, Peter, he commands him, he says, "Have me walk out on the water to you." But again, not only is Jesus' ability to walk on water a demonstration of his power, but Peter walking on the water is also a demonstration of Jesus' identity and power. It's almost as if Peter's saying, if it's really you, I'm gonna be able to walk on water, so make it happen, and then I'll believe. But I think we get confused when we make this about Peter, or if we make it about us and our faith or lack thereof. So finally, when Peter calls out, "Lord, save me," Jesus catches him, brings him into the boat. Walking on water isn't what saved Peter? Jesus does. So let me say that again. Walking on water doesn't save Peter or any of his friends. Jesus does. The walking on water was a means to an end, was a tool, a vehicle, a resource to highlight Jesus' identity and presence as the Son of God and to emphasize his saving power. And boy, does Peter need saving. It happens again and again in both little and big ways. This is not one of those kind of one and done miracle stories. And isn't that like our lives as well? Peter wobbles back and forth between doubt, faith. There's an interplay here that feels familiar to me and probably to you as well. We doubt for a moment, need reassurance, but then we're overcome by fear again, and we need more reassurance and saving, and we're okay for a minute or a day or maybe a year, but then we're pulled back into that place of fear again, and we need even deeper reassurance that God is with us. So despite being overcome by fear again and again, Jesus is there. That is the miracle. No matter how little we can see Jesus as he's walking towards us, no matter how much our fears get the best of us and make us start believing that we're seeing ghosts or demons, no matter how many times we call out for reassurance, Jesus is there. And even when we think all hope is lost, when we fear death and we can see those waves pulling us under, Jesus reaches out his hand, catches us, and brings us into the boat. Just like Peter, we need lots of reassurance. We need lots of saving, and it's all there. I also noticed that as Peter and the disciples need more and more of Jesus' presence, he gives it. At first, they have only the sight of Jesus walking on the water. They have this visual reminder that Jesus is with them. But it's confusing and not concrete enough for them. When they're afraid, the text tells us that immediately Jesus spoke to them. He didn't wait. Immediately he spoke to them. Not only now do they have the vision of Jesus, but now they have his voice, his words of assurance. Take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid. I love the notes in my Bible about Jesus' words, about these words here. It says that it is I can also be translated I am, suggesting the mysterious divine presence. And then it has scriptural references to Exodus, Isaiah, and Jonah. Jesus is saying to them, not only is it him, Jesus, the guy that you know and you love and you've been following, but he is also the God of all creation, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I love that phrase, though, mysterious divine presence. Even though this reference, I am, would have been familiar to the disciples and even signaled recognition for them about who he was, there's still mystery. Hearing Jesus proclaim union with the God of the universe does not mean that mystery goes away or that knowledge is complete and full. This is not enough for them either. Peter asks him to command him to come out on the water to him. Peter was still not sure. He needs more. He wants to be closer to Jesus. Jesus' immediate and simple reply is come. Peter wants to be drawn near, and the invitation is given. Come, Jesus says, come. Peter is then walking on water, but he notices the strong wind and becomes afraid yet again and begins to sink. Out of the water, Out onto the water, he was able to walk toward Jesus. But the wind didn't stop. Even when he's being buoyed up by the Spirit, the troubles don't cease completely. This feels like real life to me as well. Even when we know Jesus is with us, even when we're walking in our purpose, even when we have confidence, the storms continue. So of course, we become afraid again. I can so see myself in Peter. Finally, Peter yells out to Jesus, "Lord, save me." Again, the text tells us Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him. Peter is saved by Jesus' hand. He's caught and carried into the boat. The sight of Jesus, the voice of Jesus, the invitation to come near, these were all ways that Jesus was reaching out to save Peter and to make his presence known. But Peter still needed more. He needed Jesus' physical presence, to feel Jesus' strong hands, to entirely rely on Jesus for his very life. And that was okay. In this series of events, I hear the message that we can keep calling, keep asking and reaching for Jesus, and that Jesus will not only be there, but keep coming closer and closer in the midst of doubt and worry and unabated fears. And even though Peter is said to have little faith in this story, why must we see that as a criticism instead of just a description? There's dialogue throughout the story that in and of itself shows a willingness to engage and some faith. Maybe not a big, confident faith, whatever exactly that looks like, but consistent, reaching out. Peter's words, "Lord, save me," they sound like someone who's desperate. And they are the words of someone who is desperate, someone who fears for his life. But they are also a proclamation. So someone confessing his faith. Peter was calling upon the name of the Lord and recognized his need for salvation. But again, it is not about Peter's level of faith. That is not what saves him. It's Jesus. All of it, this whole exchange and interplay between faith and doubt becomes a witness. In the end, Jesus doesn't only save Peter. All who were in the boat came to worship him and say, "Truly, you are the Son of God." I also find this encouraging, that maybe our doubts and questions and fears and the reassurance and saving that we need along the way are not only a mirror for those to see themselves, others to see themselves, but also a window into the heart of God. That our struggle in community together will be transformed. So then, what about that line then? The one that Jesus says to him upon saving him, "You of little faith, why do you doubt?" Now, I'm no biblical or literary scholar, but after everything I described, I can't hear it as a reprimand or a criticism. We can't hear the inflection in Jesus' voice or see the twinkle in his eyes, but I hear Jesus saying this as a parent would say to a child. I can imagine, and I'm sure many of you can, whether you're a parent or not, a little girl or little boy out playing at the park, and they're climbing on the monkey bars or the jungle gym, and you're following close behind, ready to catch, because they're still learning and growing, and you don't want them to get hurt. So when the little one does fall and has this incredulous look of both surprise and terror, You catch her and say, "What? Did you think I would let you fall?" In that moment, you're questioning the doubt, but in such a gentle, knowing way. This is how I imagine Jesus when he says this to Peter. It's not a criticism of Peter's lack of faith, but recognition of the huge difference between Peter's abilities and Jesus's power and ability. To translate it to today's vernacular, it's as if Jesus is saying, "Why worry? I've gotcha." And this is said only in the same moment that Peter is literally being held by Jesus' hand, only after he has found true safety. In her book, Leaving Church, Barbara Brown Taylor says about herself, "I wanted to recover the kind of faith that has nothing to do with being sure what I believe and everything to do with trusting God to catch me." Sometimes when I'm preaching, it's harder to hone in on the gospel, the good news for the day. But today's texts reflect both her words and are absolutely replete with the gospel and the good news. You keep calling out, asking for God's presence to be real and concrete in your life. Keep calling, keep reaching. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Are you afraid your faith isn't deep enough, true enough, good enough? He will speak peace to his people. Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. You need saving over and over again? No worries. God is there again and again. Do you feel that torrent pulling you down? Do you fear for your life? His salvation is at hand. Jesus is ready to catch you and hold you close, both in this life and the next. Amen.